Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Are you driven, ambitious, and ready to earn? WESN, the content capital, is expanding, and we're looking for dynamic media sales executives to join our team. Sell powerful advertising solutions across television, digital, and social media platforms, and help brands tell their story. If you have strong communication skills, a passion for sales, and the drive to succeed, join WESN today. Send your CV to marketing@wsncc.com or WhatsApp 68-61662 and start building your future.
Breast cancer is the most prevalent cancer among women in Trinidad and Tobago, with an incidence rate of 37 per 100,000 population.
Definitely, I can say from when I first started just focus on breast cancer about 3 years ago, is definitely you can see a steep incline and rise.
Yeah.
And I'm generally, I don't have data to quote it, but I think I would like to say that there are more younger patients being diagnosed with breast cancer.
Yeah.
And those are patients under the age of 40. I'm thinking your practice as well, I'm sure that you see and diagnose a lot more patients at a younger age.
Absolutely.
WESN.
Well, I did not expect things to turn out like this, because dare I say it, this seems somewhat inconsistent. There are inconsistencies with regards to what's going on. Now, before I get into all of the meat of the matter, you know what the headlines are probably this morning. If you haven't, the Hadids have been essentially freed, which is a hell of a way to say it. Now, the situation, of course, is not anywhere with any boundaries of normalcy, but based on what I have read, they have been freed. The PDOs have been revoked, right? The criminal investigation continues, but let me just say this up front. As far as I'm aware, they were not charged with anything, so there is no criminal case to be tried before a court of law, at least for now, as concerned with the Hadids. And what I find interesting, and part of the inconsistencies, is their relative is still being held, but that is supposed to be, I assume, sorted out today. As the reports indicated, it will be sorted out today. Don't know why they did not just deal with all three at the same time. Maybe there's a reason that we don't know. I don't know. But before I get into that, I'd just like to point out a couple other things. One, there is a situation where a child and an adult male passed away after a pirogue carrying them capsized. A pirogue carrying 29 migrants, Venezuelan migrants. Didn't say if they're legal or illegal. Out of the 29, 6 were children. So one 5-year-old and an adult passed away once that boat capsized. I just bring that up to point out this is one of the practical reasons why illegal immigration should not be allowed. Outside of the fact that it is technically already illegal, the means in order to evade law enforcement are dangerous. And you might say, well, why don't you just make it all legal? There are practical reasons for an economy and for a society why you cannot just have your borders open. Because in theory, could we take all of the Venezuelan population when they needed somewhere to go to be removed from their economic circumstances back home? Things might not be so bad now, but there was a point in time where one could argue things were really bad. And we couldn't be that refuge for all of them. But if you don't have any sort of legal limits, any sort of limiting factor, what is to stop that from happening? So I just wanted to point that out. It is a shame that this happened when, again, I don't know if these are illegal migrants, but when you utilize means and methods like this, you take your life into your own hands. And I understand that people are desperate, but at the same time, it can't be a free-for-all. Also, so that it does not get lost into the mix, and I'm not going to speak about it necessarily in detail now, but maybe sometime in the future. The 5-member board that was appointed to TSCT is now down to 3, as another member has resigned. It is interesting in the sense of it's not as though they've been there for quite some time. Basically, the board is a year old, or just over. What went wrong? What went wrong? And this is not the only situation where you have, well, I'm not sure if TSCT would qualify as a public utility per se, but it seems as though they're under the Public Utility Ministry. And you had a situation with WASA's CEO. I'm just saying, what is going wrong with the appointees to state entities, public utilities, etc., etc., that people in high positions are either being removed or walking away? And it might be very easy for all of this to go under the radar because the big story of the day is the big story of the day. Because the Hadid's matter also touches upon questions in general with regards to state of emergency, PDOs, the validity, the ethics, to some degree the legality. And we don't know what the reasoning is with regards to this resignation to the board. It could be personal. It could be something else. We don't know. So we can't really do anything with it now. So we don't know if it's important enough to give it significantly more airtime. But what we should not do is be so distracted by the main story that we forget this down the line. These sorts of things you should always kind of store in your long-term memory. And maybe, much to do about nothing, you know, and then we could just discard that memory and move on. And maybe not. These are the kind of things that can be, though not necessarily guaranteed to be, clues or signs or symptoms of something larger. You don't then have the intention of saying, this is something larger, we must find out what it is, but rather it could be, so let's not forget it, let's not allow it to pass out of our memory. Let's just kind of keep it in reserve, just in case. So, now with those two things out of the way, inconsistencies. First, let me say where I believe it is consistent. Because the whole situation is multifaceted. You have the 3 individuals held on preventative detention orders. The reason for the PDO, the reason given within the PDO is conspiracy to commit murder. and the intended target being Prime Minister, government officials. Now, I don't necessarily know to what extent they listed out the potential intended targets, but that's essentially what they have been accused of and what was put on the PDOs. Conspiracy to commit murder. And one of the things that the Hadids were doing was they started to initiate multiple different court proceedings in order to try to get themselves released. Now, one of those things is with regards to, like I said, the SOE itself. They have a judicial review and a constitutional challenge over the issuance of PDOs, at least with regards to Mr. Hadid and his wife. With regards to his aunt, she has not been, as far as I'm aware, included in those matters. But one could assume that if the Hadids are successful, then it is a lot easier to subsequently take up the case before the courts on a similar vein with their aunt. Now, the most recent situation was the matter that was supposed to be going to the Privy Council, and that is their bid to secure an interim release, which was denied by Justice C. Prasad. Then that was overturned by the Court of Appeal, but then the state asked for a stay, and the conditions of the stay, or one of the justifications for the stay, was predicated on the fact that the Privy Council will hear this case in an expedited time frame. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, the Privy Council said, nay, we will not hear this case on an expedited time frame because the Privy Council is going on break. The earliest this could be heard would be in October. Now, if you just take that alone, because again, the stay on the interim release into house arrest was in part, the reasoning behind it was in part, well, it's going to be heard in the Privy Council. It is a short, temporary situation that will soon be rectified. In its finality, we will give the state the opportunity to be heard in the Privy Council because they have appealed the decision. So because it's so short term, we're fine with calling for a stay in the interim release. But now that the Privy Council said, no, that goes up in a puff of smoke because essentially the state of emergency can theoretically end mid-September, which would make it a moot point. Because if they are not being held under PDO, there is no need for interim release. Okay. So on the surface, I would not have had an issue for the Minister of Homeland Security changing course once it was found out that the Privy Council would not be hearing this appeal in an expedited manner, in an expedited time frame. Privy Council said, we don't now rush this. We're going on break. October is the earliest. The problem I'm having with the inconsistency, you see, given the fact that the stay in the interim release now has lost part of its justification, I have no problem with the Hadids now being released from prison. But logically speaking, the question has to be asked. It makes the appeal to the Privy Council a moot point, but the appeal was merely on interim release, which they already received from the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal's ruling for interim release was not reversed, it was merely put on pause, put on hold for the appeal to the Privy Council to go through. So why is it that the minister sought fit to rescind the PDOs seemingly in its entirety, as opposed to allowing the process to go to what I would have thought to the natural conclusion with, all right, the Privy Council can't hear the case. We will allow them to go home under house arrest. Why did that not happen? I have not yet. Now, there are a lot of articles, and there are, in some cases, revisions to the original story, and of course, they get the opinions of various stakeholders, and you know, critics of this situation, one, and the opposition, two, not necessarily exactly the same thing. They're having a field day right now. And on some level, I am not fully in agreement with some of their conclusions, because again, I would have understood if the Minister of Homeland Security saw what the Privy Council said and said, all right, Court of Appeal has allowed them to be released from the maximum security prison and to go back home under the conditions of house arrest. Let's do that. But he didn't do that. He rescinded the PDOs seemingly in its entirety. Let's not forget, they have not been charged. So now, the way how this has been managed, it makes me feel as though somebody didn't do their job, or this was to some extent disingenuous. Because the arguments to the Court of Appeal with regards to the seriousness of the matter, one would think would not change just because the Privy Council said, we have to wait, you have to wait until October. The seriousness of the matter, the national security considerations, that was part of the state's argument to say why they did not necessarily want to allow them to be released out of the maximum security prison, out of prison's custody right now, why they wanted to appeal the granting of interim release in the first place, those arguments still technically exist. The Privy Council not being available in a timely manner does not reduce the severity of the situation. So what is going on? Now, the minister has apparently said that he has reevaluated the situation. What is the difference between today or technically yesterday and say Tuesday or Monday or whenever the Court of Appeal, or last week, whenever the Court of Appeal had their stay over the weekend? What is the difference? The other thing is this, and there's so many articles, so I don't know if I could find it right now, but one of the attorneys for the state, I believe it's Gerald Ramdeen, but I can't be 100% sure, stated that one of the things is there was new evidence with regards to the medical conditions of the Hadids. And they re-evaluated the situation based on that. And there's two things for that. First of all, exactly how were you not aware of their medical circumstances? What is the new evidence? Unless their doctors, basically, their health worsened within the last couple of days, what is the new evidence with regards to their medical conditions that was pertinent to such a sudden reversal? Because, again, the Privy Council decision should not have any sort of sudden effect on their health. That's number one. Number two, if the severity of the situation is what it is, can't sufficient medical treatment be provided while in the custody of the prisons? Or some other arrangement be put in place, again, like house arrest? Because part of the consideration with regards to house arrest was who was not allowed to come and see the Hadids. That, I believe, to some degree, they were not allowed communication with the outside world or electronic devices. So I was under the impression that they would not have free and unfettered access to the outside world, whether electronically, physically, what have you. And now, in theory, they are free to go wherever they want, talk to whoever they want, do whatever they want. The abruptness and the sharp degree of the course change makes me wonder if there are inconsistencies. Now, it could be that, look, lawyers just do what lawyers do. So they're going to pile on all the justifications to get the objective they want, but on some level, this is not some sort of, I don't know how to explain this. There's a part of me that understands that it could be legal strategy, but I do feel that it potentially, if it was merely legal strategy, it was potentially borderline unethical, given the wider ramifications of what these cases meant. Not just the Hadid circumstances, but the PDOs in general. So here's the thing. Inconsistencies. First of all, on some level, because the minister said they would, if we have to wait until October, they'll more or less be held until the end of the SOE. Is the minister admitting that the government's intention is not to try to renew or continue the SOE in any way once it ends in mid-September? Right? But again, if the situation is as severe as they have made it out to be thus far up until either last weekend or the middle of this week, why does that matter? That's point number one. So we have to ask, did the minister have a Freudian slip? Is the SOE coming to an end? And if so, why? Because this thing also, to me, and we'll get into the more technical aspects of the matter when Ashraf joins me in a few minutes. To me, this seems like a face-saving exercise. Now the question is, which face are they trying to save? Or perhaps they're trying to save both. Phase one, their investigation went nowhere. And they have identified, potentially, that continuing to hold the Hadids, and potentially their aunt, any further, will only make the appearances of their situation worse. And there is no real justification to continue to hold them. And they are hoping to not be the target or subject of a significant lawsuit. In which case, I would not be surprised. I don't expect this to happen, but I won't be surprised if all of a sudden that lease situation with Blue Waters, all of a sudden, we don't really hear the government make a lot of noise over that issue down the line. Or all of a sudden it just quietly gets resolved. All of a sudden the Attorney General cries about going after the 1% that just dies a natural death, and we don't really hear anything about that kind of stuff moving forward. I don't necessarily expect it to happen, but I won't be surprised. But then there's the other aspect, the wider consideration. What is going to happen now with the other court matters with regards to PDOs and the SOE? Because part of what I thought was the motivation for the state was, if the Hadids get certain rulings in their favor, it might affect all the other PDOs. Now, if they are released, some of those matters might now be a moot point. Would all of them be a moot point? Now that they're no longer held under PDOs, can they still let me see. Can they still go for a judicial review? Gosh, there are too many different stories. I've lost my place. Yeah, can they still go after a judicial review and constitutional challenge with regards to the issuance of PDOs and potentially the state of emergency? Because if those matters are still to be considered by the high courts, right, that could affect all the PDOs, all of them. Right now, I believe the appeal court has ruled highest priority should be given to the judicial review and constitutional challenge brought by businessman Dominic Hadid and his wife over the issuance of PDOs. the State Attorney General Ramdeen indicated he was not consenting to expediting the matter, but he was also not objecting to it. And this happened yesterday as well. So, because also, I just want to bring up this point, the Prime Minister mentioned that the SOE was working, crime is down. Now, there's two things with that. One, it could be a litmus test. How would the Republic respond to such a statement? And maybe they figured the response was negative enough. Maybe we should consider not trying to continue the SOE any further past this point. Politically, it might be hurting our position and giving the opposition too much ammunition to use against us, regardless of the accuracy or the validity or the significance of the opposition's arguments and positions. The perception is negative enough. Or the intention could actually be, we don't really want to have a state of emergency throughout the entire 5 years that we're in office in this term, but let's prep the waters in case we need to utilize it again. So people will still associate murder down with SOE, murder rising, justify having to reintroduce SOE, because at the end of the day, they don't want the murder rate to be at 600 and something. All of their claims to be able to deal with crime will disappear in a puff of smoke. So they don't want that reality to happen, but they also kind of maybe don't want the SOE to have to be this long-term imposement on our citizens' freedoms and rights. So I don't know if the SOE is genuinely coming to an end naturally, or if there's political motivations behind it. This whole thing has been a mess from the beginning, in part because of a lack of leadership, because this very well could be a situation where there was no political agenda, there was no grand conspiracy to do all kind of unethical things. It was just a lot of random circumstances that came together, unfortunately, at the same time or with poor timing, and it makes the government look bad. And they technically didn't, at least intentionally, do anything wrong. That is a possibility. It is. It's just hard to believe that, given everything that has happened from since January. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll welcome Ashraf to the program, and we'll get further into the technical matters of this case, and hopefully he will help me with his insights and observation as to what happened, because there's a lot to unpack. This is a developing situation from since yesterday, but as information comes out, you know, it has potentially changed people's perceptions on the matter. It is nuanced, folks. So we'll get into all of that nuance and more after this. Stay tuned.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
In this day of stay-at-home and work from home, home has never meant more than it does today. Whether you're looking to buy, rent, or build your new home, now is the time to get going. Gittins & Gittins real estate agents are here to take you to that place of your dreams. Let us take you home. We help you find that rental to rest along the way, or journey with you to find your home destination. Investors and commercial enterprises too, call us and we'll walk the distance to place your business in just the right location. Owners, leave the headaches to us. We'll find your tenants or buyers while you stay at home. We'll even manage your property at your bidding. Anything real estate, come home to Gittins & Gittins Real Estate. Call us at 760-3280 or 747-1220 or visit us at 16 Fifth Street in Woodbrook.
health matters, and the answers you need are just one conversation away. What's Up Doc is back for an exciting season 5, and we're bringing to you Trinidad and Tobago's leading medical professionals to discuss the issues that affect you and your family. From prevention and treatment to wellness and the latest medical technology, get trusted advice, ask your questions, and stay informed. We also have an exciting new addition to the What's Up Doc family, our very own fitness instructor, Elena, who will provide easy, practical exercises you can implement in your daily routine. So don't miss What's Up Doc, Season 5, only on WESN, the content capital. Because when it comes to your health, knowledge is the best medicine.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
I'm back here and talking about the WSND Content Capital, and join me now to continue to unpack this developing story. We have, of course, as always, soon to be retired Inspector and Disaster Management Expert, Ashraf Ali.
Sean, morning.
Morning.
I'm on to your listeners out there and viewers. It's never a dull day.
It's never a dull day. My problem is, and one of the things was, I was very happy you were here to hear what I had to say in the beginning. The long and short is, it just seems a little too inconsistent with regards to everything that we have been told and the narrative thus far from the state's point of view, that now I feel as though, all right, what exactly is going on?
So from the onset, I've been saying, this incident or the allegations made, it matters not who the persons were. And I keep saying this, that the nature of the allegations was far more serious than anything else. We're talking about allegations of a conspiracy to commit murder against state officials, the Attorney General and the Prime Minister. That's the 2 highest office holders in our country, in our land. That, if that isn't serious enough, then what is? What else will be serious for us to consider to be serious enough? And taking that into context, decision was made to put these individuals under the PDOs, right? Based on the information or the intelligence that was supplied to the minister. Minister acted in the capacity of the authority vested in him with respect to SOE and the powers that he has, and he exercises his powers. So I have no issues with that in the first instance. What I am worrying about, what I'm trying to understand now is that, and many persons are trying to understand this now, during the course of this situation, I should say, the individuals, the Hadiths had the opportunity to go before the courts, make their claim, just like any other citizen. Unfortunately, or the other citizen may not have their means to do it. right? That is a different conversation. So I'm not talking about, I'm just going down the timeline of how things are happening. Then all of a sudden, there was the decision by the review committee, the SU review committee, stating that there was no need to keep the persons, there's no need to keep the Hadids in custody. There was a recommendation. It was bypassed because based on the structure, the minister does not have to listen to the advice.
Yes.
He could heed the advice. He does not have to heed the advice. That's a gray area by itself.
I mean, to the point where you kind of wonder ultimately what is the purpose of it, right? And also, at least up until this point, the state technically was consistent in whether you agreed with it or not, because the minister was like, well, I wasn't allowed to have my opinion on the matter be considered by the tribunal, right? I just found it also yesterday, I pointed out that it was rather curious. So you disagree with the tribunal's recommendation, so you're going to insist that they redo it. Well, like to me, it just adds fuel to the fire. This process seems very, very, very flawed.
And many persons are actually highlighting the issues, and learned individuals in the legal field and other persons that are commenting on the process of a PDO. Mm-hmm. And this whole scenario is actually bringing up the question of PDOs now and how it has been used.
Well, I've been saying that from the beginning. In the sense of this case, it's going to challenge the status quo, and we were fine with the status quo when we thought it was just gangsters. And we took it for granted that because here's the thing, we don't necessarily know, with certainty, all the people held under PDOs that haven't been charged, so, what their circumstances are.
Because of there was another individual, less public, but more critical, I might add.
Oh.
The senior prison officer who was alleged to have been conspiring with the gang leaders and all of that in the prison, right?
Right.
Isn't that individual already released? From I read an article that the person was released and is back, and based on the prison association indicating that he's back working without any charges being laid. Wasn't that individual also detained?
Well, I mean,
so look at the circumstance. Because of the Hadid's situation and because of the alleged allegations of them, it was more high on the agenda of the public.
But can't you? It seems as though this is basically the consequence of when you take something like a state of emergency and you use it for what I would argue was not the intention. The state of emergency was, we have an emergency now. So we need to expedite things now. So for the next 3 months, we're going to take shortcuts because we have an emergency now. That's different to saying we have a crime problem over the last year.
If it is hypothetically, and this is just for discussion purposes, I have no evidence to support anything that I'm saying. I am just having a discussion based on hypothetical scenarios. If it is that the intelligence did in fact suggest that there was some conspiracy, I'm not saying that the Hadids did it or not or otherwise. Yeah. The process that was followed was true, in fact, the correct process up to a certain point. Detain, investigate, X, Y, and Z. Good? Mm-hmm. However, this final decision based on medical circumstance that you're releasing somebody, you're releasing individuals who are of this particular, who the allegations are so serious allegations based on medical condition. I'm saying this. Is the medical condition, one of the reasons in medical condition is such that it overweighs national security interests, because conspiracy to commit murder against 2 high officials, state officials, Prime Minister and the AG, as opposed to the person's medical condition. I am not here to argue that. I saw the lawyers to argue, and probably they would have argued that in a discussion between. But it brings the question, it begs the question now. How do we justify PDOs? How do we determine or give credence to one PDO and a detention of an individual as opposed to another PDO and what circumstances would say, okay, how are we going to weigh which one has more value than the other?
Well, there's two things there. The situation with them medical, I think, is somewhat unique. And again, it begs the question, I know you might not want to necessarily allude to it, but if this was as severe and as serious as they claimed it was, outside of the fact that, the necessary medical care cannot practically be provided while in custody, I cannot see a justification to say, well, them being in custody is no longer proportionate. Proportionate to what? You have claimed conspiracy to commit murder, right? Sleep apnea is not severe enough to say that, oh, we have to release you. You can have your whatever treatment or medications or medical supervision or personnel while in some sort of custody arrangement. Because again, remember, they tried to get interim relief via house arrest. And the minister just bypassed even that course.
Because based on all the other information that you would have received, and I'm saying there was a decision that it would have cost, it was too burdensome for this. Hold on, I am not giving a defense.
Right,
I am putting information across for persons to make decisions, not on one side alone, but look at the whole situation.
Okay.
Right? I could understand certain aspects of it, but I would not make my opinion somebody else, force my opinion on anybody else. I want persons to understand the whole circumstance. There was also a situation where the courts did in fact say that the persons could go on house arrest. There was an argument by the state and the police service that that level of house arrest would put additional stress and burden on them, and they cannot maintain or sustain that type of house arrest. That is a consideration that the minister had to consider, putting that additional burden in that aspect. I'm not saying it is true. It has significant bearing, but had some bearing on the decision.
I'll say this. I feel as though members of the public found the scenario difficult to believe from the beginning. And now that you have logistical or medical reasons that somehow trump a severe criminal consideration, it will further fuel that, whether rightfully or wrongfully. Because again, we don't actually have the detailed information to make accurate assessments of exactly how far these things apply or how significant they weighed in on the matter. But the appearance to members of the general public, you know, whatever we, and again, I have started to say this year, whatever we say here, you could guarantee that people independent of us that might not even have heard anything we had to say will have more severe, more speculative, more extreme opinions on the matter.
This whole thing just brings the fact that to the forefront of how we view certain things when it comes to criminal activities and criminality. There is a cry for white collar crime to be dealt with, right? And we always say that there are so-called big fish in certain areas, and they know a lot of persons like to acknowledge big fish as the ones in the higher the higher persons of society who has much more financial ability or certain type of connections and things to do certain things. However, there's an individual still incarcerated at this point in time on a PDO who was in prison and then put on a PDO. That is Raji Ali, right? Alleged gang leader. Right? So, when he was put on a PDO, it was alleged that he had made threats against government officials.
Right.
And threatening the lives of individuals. And it's a matter of national security that he was detained. So, look at how this is happening. So the general public continue asking for dealing with white-collar crimes. This is not the defense for this UNC, for this administration, but it's for us to understand we really don't know what we really want. Now that an individual of somebody prominent in society has been alleged involved in a serious crime, serious allegations of this nature, we don't see it the way that we want to see it, because we only see the individual and what is motivated towards them. and whether political or everything else. We're not seeing it for the value of the basic circumstance. It's allegations against the state. Special treatment? No special treatment. But here is the argument that another person saying, let's hear what they want to do. Let's hear how they involved, why they was involved. I don't believe that they was involved all of a sudden, but if it was a particular type of person who believe he's a gang, yeah, we believe it 100%.
Well, part of it is when one of the three conspirators is a 77-year-old woman who may or may not have certain other health considerations that really makes it questionable her participation.
And that in itself brings the whole question about the specific allegations and when that allegation was made, how it was managed up to now.
But here's the thing, because you brought up the whole situation with white-collar crime earlier, and I think that's the thing. I am of the opinion, based on what I have heard from others, although this is not a national consensus.
Yeah.
The Attorney General primes the population. We are going after white-collar crime. We hear the chairman or CEO of Blue Waters is arrested. So the public is primed, white-collar crime.
Yes.
All of a sudden, why was he detained? Oh, conspiracy to commit murder. And there will be people who are then like, hold on, stop. I own Blue Waters. Why am I going to be doing this?
It does seem the connection is, the
right.
public can't see that connection.
There's a disconnect.
Yeah.
Right? And one of the things I said yesterday was, note, the AG, first of all, I think it was an error for him to say, we are going after white-collar crime, because let's not forget, then the minister had to say, no minister can approve or give out PDOs, right? Or instruct PDOs. So he says, we. Shouldn't say that if you want to maintain the fact that police investigations are independent and you cannot tell the police what to do with regards to who to investigate for crime. But then also going after white-collar crime. Notice too, and maybe it's because it's premature, but at least as so far, the only person that could be connected to the Attorney General's statements in Parliament is Mr. Hadid and his wife, right? There has been no other potential targets of the initiative to go after white-collar crime. So if that holds to be true, then now the implication is, well, he kind of was talking about Hadid's, but the case took a left-turn swerve, and it makes the whole thing kind of seem very inconsistent once again, right? Because you're priming us up for A, and then you hit us with B, and then now you say it's all serious, but you release them in the end rather kind of too easily, in a way. I know it wasn't easy per se, but it's really hard for a layman to not look at the situation and say, so the Privy Council say they're not expediting it, so you just kind of give up on the whole PDO, wholesale. And it's really hard for the public to make sense of it in a situation where you already have a trust and confidence problem with the entire criminal justice system.
So true.
The entire criminal justice system. This is not helping the situation one bit.
And what is not helping the situation, adding to the situation, but persons are not paying particular attention because this one is a front burner right now. Last weekend we didn't have 2 double homicides, right?
Yeah.
A recent shooting.
Yeah. Well, it was a double and a triple.
Right, but crime is down, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Crime is down. Yes, the murder rate from last year to now is
reduced.
It reduced by a handful.
By a single-digit figure, which to me is statistically not relevant enough to celebrate.
Exactly, by a handful, right?
Right.
Less than by a handful. And I'm simply saying is this: we're in a state of emergency. We full into states of emergencies, I should say. Coming after another. The minister indicated there was some heightened police presence should have in MOVA because it contemplating some gang activities and violence. Okay, fine. But then why wasn't those type of efforts being put in place when we had a state of emergency, because the state of emergency was based on security threats and also gang violence. So why now? Because it is now going to. So yes, the inconsistencies in how they approach certain things, it begs the question is whether or not we are actually getting the value that we want.
The thing is, there's 2 points I want to make kind of tied to this. One that is tied to something you said earlier, with regards to the whole conspiracy to commit murder, right? The state of emergency was meant to respond to an emergency, not to then continue in perpetuity and then when things come up. And I think this is why for the Hadid's case, it seems to just not work out properly, because I don't think it was meant to apply in a case like this. Not to say that you could not have a state of emergency because of a conspiracy to murder the Prime Minister, but one would have thought they would have gotten more evidence, the situation would have matured more, then they would have initiated the state of emergency specifically for this, treated with this, had all the ducks in a row, and that would have been it.
Here lies the little gray area, or I should say the gray area that is expanding within this PDO.
Expanding, yes.
Because if they had utilized the actual laws of Trinidad and Tobago, the existing laws, not the extended powers that we have, for conspiracies to murder, and arrest and detain under those laws, right? The person would have gotten their day, they would have gotten an ability to go.
Because they would have been charged.
They would have gotten a charge. Charges would have been laid. They go before the court and they would have been on bail.
Well, here's the thing.
Hold on. They would have been bail. The investigation could have been continued. So they would be continuing the investigation, gathering much more information to present. Now, if that is the case, then somebody would have to go before the DPP, present as a case. But they didn't go before the DPP. They went the other route with a detention order.
Yeah.
If they had to go on before the DPP, I strongly would have believed that the DPP would have said, listen to me, a case of that nature, knowing the DPP and how meticulous he does operate.
Yeah.
Right? And how independent that office is, all the ducks would have been in a row. Cross your eyes, dot your T, because you're bringing some information and intelligence. You're bringing evidence to me to make a decision of arrest. Right now, they say the investigation is ongoing. Okay, fine, the investigation is still ongoing. How long have they been on a PDO?
A month, apparently.
And remember I said from the beginning, an investigation of this nature doesn't finish so easy. Conspiracy to commit murder is wide. It have a lot of information to analyze and other things to look at. And so I don't know whether or not they use the PDO because the PDO was designed for deterring an individual from committing anything else.
Right,
so,
speed and deterrence.
Speed and deterrence. So it was used in the correct procedure. Initially, it was used in correct procedure. The continued detention was the problem, because you couldn't justify continued detention on a PDO.
Well, not just that. I think the problem is, if they went the normal way, going through the DPP, who would then advise them, they would not have acted prematurely, would not have, if there was anything there, if they would not have prematurely tipped off the targets of a serious investigation, right? And they would have had the evidence when they arrested and then subsequently charged. But because the PDO is a shortcut, on some level, I think my stating that they're using shortcuts now proves to be true in this case. And what is the, again, for speed, to prevent something, right? Not to investigate something.
But we don't because this statement I'm going to make here is not a defense of anybody. So I don't want anybody to believe I'm defending anyone. But there are persons who contributed to this whole thing. There were contributing factors to this whole thing. One, when you advise the minister, somebody had to advise the minister. And who advises the minister? in this nature, in this circumstance, who asks for a PDO to be issued? The minister don't issue PDOs just so unless a PDO is being requested. Who does that? Commissioner of Police. Right? Commissioner requested a PDO. The minister has the authority to acknowledge or not. If he didn't acknowledge it, he would have been. He would have. In one. He would not have been. In one light, he's saying he's not supporting the information of the Commissioner of Police. And he could have been put in a position where he didn't support and something happened.
If he didn't approve of the PDO.
If he approved of the PDO. That is one circumstance. He approved of the PDO, and the party who's supposed to bring more information or bring more information to support what his action, didn't. So in all, it shows that the process of a PDO and how the PDO is being used very loosely in certain contexts, right? It has ramifications across the board. Now, this situation has much more in it than we believe. This is just not a release of this is not just a release. This is just not a release. The mere fact that they're saying investigation are continuing, they may have some things in the future. The fact that this whole conversation of the person has been released from the PDO, there is some legal ramifications that we have to worry about with
PDOs.
With the PDOs. The handling of it, in my opinion, it begs the question of whether or not we really understand what we're using the PDO for.
Well, so consider this, right? Because again, if the SOE was because of this conspiracy to commit murder situation, you would have thought they would have had more than enough intelligence beforehand before they acted, right? And again, you then use the SOE as a means to interject, to interrupt the process quickly, right? To make that quick, okay, we need to cause them to have to stop this, to prevent this with speed, right? But it's not necessarily an investigative tool. Arguably, it's been used to suppress crime, not solve crime. Even with the emergency powers with regards to search and seizure, etc., that apply only to certain aspects, right? Not necessarily in all aspects. It is still not necessarily a tool to solve crime. And because of that now, we are this is an example, as I said before, of, well, these are the consequences of using a tool not appropriate to the task, right? But consider this also, right? Because technically the SOE was in response to a syndicate. But it seems as though there have been multiple threats against government ministers after that initial one. There was the situation on the Friday when we were told the following week that while Parliament was in session, there was a threat against the government that they took seriously, but they never told Parliament staff, and they never told the opposition, and they never told anybody, and they never told the public there were people in the public gallery. So, but it seems as though there are apparently multiple threats because the syndicate, they haven't brought that up again. Because when they had the protests, all of a sudden people were calling for unity for the gangs. So obviously the gangs were, at least at that point, not operating in a syndicate. So it almost seems like there have been multiple threats against the government. And we have not necessarily seen any real resolution to any one of them with regards to criminal investigations. But I just find it interesting. There's an irony with these SOEs. And the fact that the authorities are trying to say crime is down. Because the most heinous crime that is at the root cause of all these SOEs, one could argue, is on the rise. Because threats against the Prime Minister, there are multiple threats. And they keep going. There's more and more and more and more. And what is it about this situation where, while under state of emergency, that started off with a threat against the government, are we saying, wait, so people are saying that the government has instituted a state of emergency because someone threatened public officials, and more people think it's valid to continue to threaten the life of the Prime Minister legitimately?
Because one of the things is that how we deal with certain situations like that. You make a threat against any individual, it's an offense. arrested and he could be charged and put before the court. I don't want a PDO.
But that's what...
So
we haven't seen the charges.
So that is what I'm saying. You don't need a PDO. On a normal circumstance, outside of a state of emergency, the laws permit threats, they could be put before the court and we could charge. Now, when persons making threats, they play placed on a PDO, no charges laid against them, eventually the matter is going... If you put on a PDO, is the threat eliminated or not? Maybe, maybe not. Because if the person is if that individual specifically is going to make the physical threat, then it means that that individual has been detained, but that person has not been charged as yet. And this is why I keep saying that we're in a state of emergency, and the public is not. But from the comments of the public, people saying we don't feel that we're in a state of emergency. And I'm saying if we're in a state of emergency for so long, you must be able to feel that you're in a state of emergency. So when the state of emergency is finished, hey, yeah, we was in a heightened state of, you would see a heightened state of police presence and certain activities being done, certain things that are being done. But right now it's business as usual in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, because I believe, as you pointed out, if the police have another gear, they could ratchet things up and intensify operations, then is it really a state of emergency that we're operating under? Or we just have emergency powers at our convenience? Because with all of these threats against the government, if you do not translate it into charges, then basically the ultimate question, the logical question is always going to be, what happens to these conspiracies to kill the Prime Minister when the PDOs end? Because it has to end at some point. And if all you're doing is preventing them from going any further with the PDOs, when it ends, what's to stop the conspiracies from continuing? Because the state's case on keeping them in custody.
But what is preventing somebody else or some other individual or some other group from making serious threats against our state officials again?
Well, in the short run, it's because you don't want to be held under PDO, and it's very easy once you're discovered for that to happen. But my issue is this, and the Hadid's case highlight this just in a shorter term. The state made the case up until the end of last week, and maybe even this week, because the minister was disagreeing with the tribunal. No, there are wider security considerations. Right? There are wider considerations for the state. Farid Ali was here basically making a very good objective case on the matter. You can't just throw that out. No. But it seems as though all of a sudden that's not as important to the minister anymore.
But at the same time, the minister, that is what I'm saying, the minister made a judgment call. The minister is making a judgment call now based on the advice of a further additional medical information that he claimed, right? They stated that the further medical information or updated medical information was given, and based on that, they made that and other situations, other information, they made a decision to revoke the PDOs. Good? Now, all I'm simply pointing out here is that the way that the PDOs have been used inconsistently, there are a lot of gray areas with respect to the PDOs. The PDO was never intended as a crime-fighting tool. It's additional powers when you have an extenuating circumstance.
Isn't it in the name?
Yes.
Preventative.
Preventive detention order. So the public, once the public hear a PDO has been issued, the next thing that the public wants to hear is what charges that person was arrested for. PDO is not a precursor to charges. It's an extraordinary power given in a state of emergency that person rights and privileges could be detained or suspended or taken away and put on a prevention order and released without a charge, because that is the extended powers that you have.
Now, I mean, ironically, isn't PDOs kind of more meant for your other area of expertise more than crime fighting, in the sense of, oh, we had a volcano, a hurricane.
Right. So,
we need to maintain law and order.
Right. So when we had the COVID outbreak,
right,
you did not need anyone to get a PDO because in a technical term, under the Health Act, the Public Health Act, there was a caveat in it that if person needs to be detained for prevention of the spread of the disease, the detain you one time and sent into a quarantine center. Were you not detained against your rights? Were your family members because of the public interest and national health interests?
Right, but the idea is
the same principles with a PDO, national security interests as opposed to a pandemic.
But the problem is, again, it's not geared to further investigations and prosecutions.
But what the public and how it has been put across in the public, that if an individual has been held under PDO, automatically charges will be, well, will we hear what they're getting charged for?
Well, here's the thing, because, you know, the public has these questions, and at some point, the information of how many being detained have been charged has been less and less forthcoming.
So that is what I'm saying. So the messaging towards a PDO is that the PDO is being used as, okay, we detain this one, we crime is down. But at the end of the day, after the release of the PD, after the persons get released from PDOs, no charges laid against them, or not all persons, not everybody who has been released on a PD, who had a PDO is not charged. There are some who who have charges, but the vast majority of the individuals are yet to be charged because of the fact that we have this thing that a PDO equates to
an
arrest and charge. It's an extraordinary power that you have, or extended powers you have in a state of emergency, that you can detain an individual for a period of time without laying a charge, and they can be released without you having to answer to the state because of the circumstance.
Well, except.
But now.
Once the situation ends,
right,
because we saw this from 2011.
Right, so because the state of emergency has been extended over a period of time, the PDOs can be extended. However, I'm saying the PDOs wasn't intended for that. So now we're in a position, and we're in a very critical position right now. And I say a crisis position when it comes to PDOs. How do we deal with the PDOs and this particular incident where they had these going forward, because there are a number of persons on PDOs who may be able to present a case similar in terms of medical condition and deteriorating medical conditions, other issues also. But then here's the kicker. What could trump the whole card? Was any of those individuals placed on a PDO for conspiracy to murder two of the highest officials in Trinidad and Tobago? So if that is not serious enough, so I'm just sharing a serious offense of this nature resulted in those individuals being released.
You see, the thing is, you can understand why the police are like, oh, we need to lock them up with PDOs. But there's a thing that you have to consider at times. Just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you should do a thing, right? And if you can't prove and charge a conspiracy case, and as Mr. Ali pointed out Farid Ali pointed out on Wednesday, conspiracy is not an easy thing to prove.
And I said so from the beginning.
Right? So, if you are not prepared if you don't have the capacity rather to go all the way with this matter, then there is an argument to be made. Maybe you shouldn't utilize a PDO unless you have intelligence to say that the threat is imminent, in which case arguably you would have some amount of evidence that could potentially lead to charging anyway, if your intelligence is that imminent, that the threat is soon to happen, right? We do not have the impression that is the case. And the thing is, with regards to all the conspiracy charges, because that is part of the reason central to all of these state of emergencies, right? Yes, the thing is, what happens if and when these individuals are set free? Do the conspiracies, because allegedly now, there are multiple. The Hadids were not necessarily tied to the initial state of emergency. So at the very least, there are two big ones, according to the state, right? Do these things now, I mean, even now, we have to ask, wait, so if they were legitimately conspiring to murder the Prime Minister, are we to just assume, oh, well, you know, they're just not going to do it anymore? Like, and what about, obviously, the hardened criminals, particularly the ones who are held under PDOs, while in remand, because they had to be removed from Golden Grove and sent to the barracks, right? Obviously, you're trying to prevent them from instigating something. They were part of the syndicate. What happens when that all goes away, right? And now I think the level of lawsuits you are going to see out of this period of a state of emergency is going to trump what we saw out of 2011. And part of the question now is this a situation where, and you should never consider this easily, ever, but this is now a situation where I think the public, whether it is right or wrong, will have a very hard time accepting the fact that because it's agents of the state doing their job, they are protected from personal liability while potentially costing the Treasury maybe potentially all of the money that Minister Tanku was able to find by taxing and fining us over, you know, nickel and diming us for various different things, right? Because we saw hundreds of thousands of dollars per lawsuit in 2011. That did not have the same amount of time being held, and arguably, in some cases, not the same conditions. Now, this is just a Google search, but it seems as it's been 434 to 449 people held under PDO.
Okay.
Now, based on just your personal knowledge, is that a significantly higher number than 2011?
I can't say. I have the figure. I don't have the figure offhand, so I can't really quote it.
Let me do a search and see. And again, this is not necessarily guaranteed to be accurate. Let me do a search and just see if the AI could tabulate it for us.
Many of the persons that were held under the 2011, I mean, there was a lot of there was a lot of persons just.
Apparently. This is the AI. I don't know how real this is, how true this is. It says exactly 16 people were detained under PDOs in 2011. 16, 16.
Not a lot of persons. So listen. There was a difference.
Right.
There was a lot of persons that was arrested.
Right.
Under that state of emergency and held. PDOs may not have been the ones that were issued.
Right.
There's a difference.
Right. So some of the lawsuits might have not been over PDOs.
Not be over PDOs.
But the thing is, with 400 plus PDOs.
No.
And I think it might be something like 100 plus people which have been charged.
And that has to be put into context because we have been in a state of emergency for more than a year and something now. Right? From the latter stage of the last administration all the way down to now. So it had to be put into context. How many persons within the periods, right? So if you divide that from about 30, because it's 3 months, and we have been in about 4 consecutive, if I'm not mistaken, about three consecutive, I think.
We had a period of 6 months under the UNC, and now this would be the third 3-month period.
Yeah. And then we had a first 3 months.
Then we had the first 3 months under the PNM.
So
12 months.
So probably about a year. So that is 400 in an entire year. That because that data didn't say no. That says how many detained under PDOs.
But the trick is some of those have been detained. Maybe because of there was approximately 3 months, give or take, break between the PNM's SOE and the UNC's SOE because they did it sometime after they won the election, not immediately after.
And understandable, based on the information that AI will bring up to you, AI wouldn't be able to analyze it like that.
But what I'm saying is some of the people have been detained from since the beginning of the first month of the UNC's SOE. So we're talking at least at the end it will be 10 months because you had that 1 month gap.
Right, and so I'm saying that figure is not analyzed in the way that the AI would not be able to analyze it. So, but holistically, in a 10-month period, say 10 to 12-month period, 400 and something persons who have been detained on the PDOs, which is not significantly high because we don't have a comparative, we don't have anything to compare with to say, well, okay, on another period of a PDO, because the PDOs are dependent on circumstances, how you issue these PDOs, and based on the nature of the threats.
So 4,000 people were detained under anti-gang legislation in 2011, according, again, to the AI. Don't know how true it is. But here's the math to consider. Now, they did say that at least one lawsuit ended up with a $400,000 payout.
Okay.
At just $100,000, if we go with around 100 have been charged, so say only 300 or so, right, could sue. At a $100,000 payout, that's a $30 million bill, basically. And then that's assuming that they're all limited to $100,000. Right? So if we have any $400,000.
Just using basic mathematical calculations, yes, I can see how difficult it is, or how alarming it is when you're looking at a figure of $30 million. I can see how alarming it is. But each case will be considered individually, and it may or may not go that way. But the whole issue is that...
But not everybody might unless it's a class action lawsuit.
But the biggest issue to have, and continue to be for us to address and for us is how the PDOs are being utilized. Should at the end of this SOE, whether they have any extension or otherwise, that is the prerogative of the administration, based on whatever information they have, or whatever national security interest is being threatened, they will determine if it's going forward, if they have to extend it or not. But the PDO cannot be the crime fighting tool, and we all know that. When you put
just by the way, just tell the Prime Minister that now, because apparently the SOE is working early in the week.
But so
I know.
In context,
yeah,
in context,
we spoke about it before.
Like, in context, the Prime Minister is right. In context, you have to understand in context of what is the PDO, the state of emergency is working because crime is down.
Well, in that, yes, if you limit it just to that. But again, what we've been saying highlights the fact that in the long run, are you actually solving crime or long-term preventing crime? You are short-term preventing it, but just like the conspiracies,
exactly.
It could all restart.
So what I'm saying, our Prime Minister, the Prime Minister is right in the statement that they made that crime is down based on the statistical data. Crime is down. Holistically, we can argue on the opposite side, what type of crimes are down? Because there are certain type of crimes that is on the rise, or has been on the rise for a while.
Also politically,
right?
I understand that is in the literal sense the statement is true, but politically, right? When it's not just what you say, but all of the unstated implications, that was not a wise position to take in the affirmative, given the fact that by the next day, Northeast Division is basically saying, ooh, intensified operations because of rising crime.
Fair enough. I don't know the information that the Prime Minister had to make this statement, so I'm not judging on the context of it. I am just taking the context of the statement.
I fear that she is not necessarily, because we don't know if the National Security Council is meeting or not. We just don't know, right? I am not necessarily sure if she has enough of a hands-on approach to what I would argue to be the most important aspect of her administration right now. Because she has, after criticizing Dr. Rowley for not being present at the press conference to announce the state of emergency in December the 30th under the PNM, she has subsequently been absent to every single announcement of an extension or declaration of a state of emergency under her current government. Right? I don't know why. I don't know if she doesn't like the fact that after the lawsuits from 2011, the fact that her face was front and center with the declaration might be potentially used against her. She thinks it makes her look bad. Whatever the situation is, we are under state of emergency. What other aspects of government right now should be taking priority for her attention? And she has seemingly not been that present for the most part. Minister Alexander has been left, to some degree, I think, negligently, on his own for someone that doesn't have political experience to have to be front and center this. I said this about the Kayasili matter, that the fact that he was left alone to speak about the Joshua Samru shooting situation, and nobody else in cabinet who has more political experience than him attempted to weigh in on the matter in any significant way, including the Attorney General, I found was to some extent ridiculous, because we know who he is. He's a police officer. He hasn't come through the ranks of politics. He's not a lawyer. He's not a public figure in that capacity, right? So I suspect the Prime Minister is not necessarily that tuned into what is going on in nitty-gritties. And it's one thing if on a normal year, where, all right, you have ministers, you all see about it, but it's a state of emergency. You need to be aware of what's going on, because what you say matters.
But then I still keep on asking the question, are we still in a state of emergency?
You know, now, to be fair, the PNM started this with the whole no curfew. You know, we're on a state of emergency, but it's not really a state of emergency, because it's only a state of emergency to the criminals, so you're not going to feel nothing. And I feel as though, again, we don't have different ideologies, competing ideologies and parties. So the UNC continues this trend.
I believe that they did, on the first declaration of a state of emergency of this administration, based on the nature of the threats, they did not want to operate in a different capacity of putting the country under
curfew.
A curfew, because it may have some more ramifications financially and economically.
Yeah, we probably can't bear it.
Could not have bear it. And then getting into politics so early and taking over from an administration and winning the elections to that margin from an administration that nobody thought would have lost, right?
Some people did.
Well,
outside of Port of Spain.
Persons, yeah. But I think they were in a particular, between a rock and a hard place in whether or not to go with the more strategic approach in dealing directly with the threats, or from a tactical perspective.
Well, consider this. How true, best to your knowledge, was Gary Griffith's statements that there have been multiple threats to people in high office over the years? And technically speaking, threats against office holders is nothing new.
Well, that is part and parcel of the getting into public life. Threats will come against you. However, there are threats and then there are other specific type of threats. All threats won't be the same.
No, I understand that. And listen, before I say what I say, just understand that I know that it is not as simple as I'm going to make it out to be, but unfortunately, the politicians cannot avoid this perception. And if they can't account for it, then it is to their detriment, regardless of whether it is true or fair. 2011 is a threat against the government, they call it a state of emergency. Arguably, they maybe prevented the threats, but it never really resolved anything. But we kind of look at 2011, at least before, as a blip, as an exceptional circumstance where things happen, it is what it is. Except now, months after they get elected again, this is Prime Minister Kamala Bissasa's second term as Prime Minister in her career. There's another threat against the government, right? And that has basically, practically persisted up until now. And the question you have to ask is, how is it that other prime ministers potentially have threats against them, and they don't go through with all of this, and this prime minister does? Is it that the threats are more serious? Because my fear is...
Or is it that on one side you're saying, or then our trading on the other side, is it that it is prime minister taking the threat seriously?
Well, because the problem is this. I mean, listen, it could be that her modus operandi might lead to conditions that have greater threats against her than her predecessors. We don't technically know One could argue, though, that at the very least, as far as we're aware, I don't believe Basil Brown called a state of emergency because of threats against him, right? Now, the thing is, this is turning into, even if it is legitimate, it's turning into a cry wolf situation. Because I think if there was a case where, oh, you had a legitimate threat, it was a severe threat. And we could see where, you know, I said it, err on the side of caution. You can't just take these things for granted. The problem is, after the second or third or fourth time, and we don't see charges.
That is where I'm glad it came there, because that is what I'm going with. And I wanted to point it out. Not all threats would result in a charge laid against somebody. There are threats made, and you really don't know who the exact person who's making the threat.
Right.
But threats are there. When you have intelligence that suggests there's a threat or a group of individuals, there's no one person to say the threat is directed towards. But there are threats. And if that is the case, appropriate measures will be put in place. Some measures may or may not be put in place based on the threats, right? Because it can be addressed in different manners. Heightened security. If you have heightened security, sometimes you don't even know that
that would have happened in the past. When there was threats, they would have just quietly, subtly increased security.
Exactly. But sometimes the public doesn't even recognize heightened security.
Yeah.
Right? But what we're looking at is that when we hear the word threats, we want to see it result in someone being arrested. For us to believe, and when I say us, I mean the general public, to believe the threat is real. And I'm simply saying this. Based on my experience, the threats are real. It may not be directly towards you, it might be directed towards the group. But sometimes the threat is real. You have to take the appropriate actions. That does not mean that the threat does not exist anymore. Just like how the commissioner indicated that there are threats made against him through his family. He would have to put some measures in place for him and his family, but he is not acceding to the threats, right? And changing how his position.
Well, consider this. We saw under the PNM a deputy commissioner of prisons be attacked, right? They didn't call for state of emergency. I have seen Prime Minister Dr. Heath Rowley at the time basically travel amongst the public with minimal security, right? Now, no one is going to say that Dr. Heath Rowley was beloved by the masses. He might have been beloved by his supporters.
So my question, the question still remains. Was there threats against Dr. Rowley? Yes or no? I am not here to say yes or no. I don't have information to suggest anything else. Was it dealt with internally? Could have been, based on the nature of the threat. Did he believe that, listen, I am not going to let those threats dictate how I carry out my function or how I behave? It means that his internal security has to put measures in place. Heightened security, no heightened security, he dealt with it the way that he dealt with it. Each prime minister has to take, or each public official, I should say.
But the thing is, only one prime minister has utilized a state of emergency in such a manner to try to counter threats against public office holders.
And I cannot, because this may not be a unique, this may be a unique situation to public office holders. It was not one individual alone.
Right, so then now there's the flip side to consider. Why is it so unique?
Because we would not know the full extent of it.
Right, now there are multiple implications to that statement. But given the fact that similar enough things happened in 2011, it begs the question, what does Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar, what is it within her modus operandi, whether subtle or direct and blatant, that causes people to want to more seriously go down this path to the point where you call state emergencies to prevent it?
At this point in time, I plead the fifth.
Right? Because the thing is, you can't say that she is so unpopular, that she is so much more unpopular than all of the prime ministers before, that accounts for it.
So
now, one of the possible explanations is, and it does not help that you have a commissioner of police where arguably one could question his capacity to do his current job, because it is one thing, you have people that you are the rank lower, and you are not prepared to be promoted one rank. He jumped 2 ranks. He was a senior superintendent. He bypassed ACP and DCP to be commissioner. So he did not necessarily deal with responsibilities on those levels and does not have experience in the executive. That is not always a bad thing, right? But given the fact that he is managing ship, he declared the first SOE now, which was rather odd. First time we've seen a commissioner do it, as far as I'm aware, at least in modern history, right? Is it that this is either a cry wolf situation or you are you're being overly cautious, you're overestimating the situation, right? In which case, because the thing is, you cannot call an SOE every time a threat is made against the government. Literally, unless you're saying that Gary is lying, and this is a very rare occurrence, if we were to call an SOE every time somebody said that they wanted to commit some act of violence against a prime minister, a sitting prime minister, the nature of politics means that someone is going to hate every prime minister. Every prime minister is going to have a hater. We will basically be perpetually on an SOE if we operate like that. So there has to be a point where you just can't do it. It would be going too far, too often. It would be too much. It would be too much of an overreaction, right? So now the question is, to what extent does that apply here? Because I'm not sure, I don't even think the coup lasted this long, obviously. So have we ever been under state? I don't know about the 1970 coup, if, you know, to what extent, how long that lasted.
I was not wrong.
Yeah, so neither me. So to what extent is this now, it's been almost it's been almost 9 months, technically, under the UNC. Like, this is an unprecedented situation.
And that's what we keep saying. We are uncharted waters when it comes to the SOE and PDOs. The circumstance and the nature of the threats and the existing nature of the threats. And just like everything else, not because there are threats made, by tomorrow it's going to be contained, somebody arrested, and somebody put before the court. It's not as simple as that. There are a lot of working parts. There are a lot of additional things. But the public doesn't want, the public is not interested in that aspect of it. I can understand that because of the political, the politics behind it. The reality is that I am not aware, and I may not be, and you may not be, and the general public will not be aware of the nature of these threats and the extent of the threats. When it comes to threats of this nature, it's on a need-to-know basis. Hard to say. Hard for some persons to swallow, but you can't divulge information of this nature. There lies the risk when you're dealing with a law enforcement activity in a public space. Because what is acceptable for intelligence within an investigation and how we deal with investigation, that can't work on the public.
One of my concerns, and I alluded to this from the beginning, is are you inadvertently revealing the extent of intelligence gathering by potentially prematurely arresting the Hadids, right, and not being able to charge them? Because if the information is so sensitive that you can't reveal it, and I agree with you, that's fine, except on some level, let's assume that they are guilty of something. Obviously now, what they know will then be known to the criminal element. You can't stop them from talking about that aspect of the situation with their lawyers, because their lawyers are going to ask them, why did they arrest you, right? So at some, yes, I guess I am saying that lawyers can be a way to communicate with other people, but I mean, the lawyers might be communicating with their family members. And then if this is some grand conspiracy, other family members might be involved. I am not saying that they are guilty of anything or anyone is involved with anything. I am just laying out the scenario to present an argument, right? Whatever the Hadids know is, for all intents and purposes, public knowledge. So they will know what their interactions were. So they will know potentially where the intelligence was gathered. Not necessarily how, but where. And even if they're innocent, what the Hadids know is essentially public knowledge. And they will know where the intelligence was gathered. And all of that could potentially be used by any kind of counterintelligence, and apparently transnational crime is now big into military training and counterintelligence training. So you have potentially revealed things indirectly through this case, and it's one thing if you got charges and convictions and what have you, but if you get nothing for it, what is the point? But consider this, I'm not saying the Hadids are innocent or guilty, but these are not street gangsters pulling out guns and killing people every other week. And I think this is the first time under the SOE situation and the PDOs that the public is seeing individuals held, right? I mean, you could also technically say Christopher Samaru and people of that ilk, but he might be the only other person I know of that will qualify for this, right? But what he was charged for, I think there's an expectation that he's not going to be held and prosecuted on the same level, right? I don't even know if he's still being held under a PDO. I did find him being held under a PDO. It was kind of ridiculous and an overreaction. But anyway, this is the first time we're seeing the full weight of the state of emergency being used against citizens who potentially are innocent of any and everything, and who are not obviously parts or facilitators of any kind of street violence. Because we haven't successfully dealt with, since Dolce, any kind of shot caller or drug lord or yes, gang leaders, but you know, to what extent does that tie back to the big fish that are part of the transnational crime, whatever. And again, I'm not saying that they're innocent, but this is the first time where you have names and a face, and you're looking at people who interact with normal society who potentially can be innocent. And I think now that makes members of the public nervous when the justification behind this exercise now is difficult.
So it now brings, and I like the speculations that you're coming across. It now brings to the and the forefront of many persons should understand that there are many faces to criminal activities and criminals.
True.
What we perceive to be the criminals are not always the criminals alone. They are different tiers, and everybody have their role and function in a
and some might surprise you.
In an organization. We have seen this in documentaries, real life documentaries, and history have shown that the thugs on the streets, the enforcers, the ones are not the ones pulling the strings.
Yeah.
The ones that pull the strings or run the enterprise are the ones you're least likely to believe is capable of managing an organization like this. And this just brings the bigger picture of what organized crime is about. And I'm not putting any aspect, we are not saying that the Hadids involved in anything at all. I'm not saying so.
The risk is they might be innocent, and it will then give the public an impression that people that look like this, that have circumstances like this, that might be in scenarios similar to this, will then subsequently, the stereotype will be they are automatically innocent. That's the real risk here. And that we will assume things from this case moving forward to always be true, as opposed to assessing it on the merits of each individual situation.
And that's the reality of how organized crimes operate. An organized group, criminal enterprise. At the top of the enterprise levels,
yeah,
you'll have the individuals who interact as normal with everybody. Nobody knows what they are running, and this is not in Trinidad and Tobago alone. This is across the world. This is how criminal enterprises operate, and levels in their organization.
But I think it is not reasonable to just assume, because we know what these stereotypes are, right? With certain ethnicities and how those ethnicities are stereotypically or rumored to be linked to crime. You can't assume an entire demographic, racial demographic, are all drug lords. Like, they can't all be drug lords, right? At the same time. It just makes no sense. There's not enough illegal money, no matter how much it is, to go wrong. That's just not how this works, right? So then now you have to ask, are these individuals potentially linked to anything, right? And I think ultimately, this goes back now. This might be an example of subconsciously a society applying the premise of innocent until proven guilty, I would argue correctly, because they are uncomfortable with just, let's assume it to be true and move on from there. It's like, hold on, time out, stop. Because we kind of tolerate it when we think it's gangsters, not because, well, some people because they just want to see gangsters dealt with. I would argue it's because, no, you actually have the risk of imminent violence with some of the gangsters, yes. Some. So it's a little bit more justifiable. But even then, some people, like this show, has brought up the fact that, hey, innocent until proven guilty is not something that you just rescind with your convenience. So the Hadids now kind of just, they shift the equation just enough where the public's concerns, it's not so easy to just kind of hand wave away. And perhaps, and I like the fact that both for conditions in the prison and for the PDOs and other things, it's as you say, it's not about the Hadids, but rather a situation that we should have been looking at and considering from even before. From even before, and it is a shame that it came to this, that is now forcing society and the courts and the government have to look at these things more closely, right? All right. We have some comments to get through. Let's get to the comments quick. First of all, accountability, accurate assessment of the charges and claims levied against an individual's estate. Their penalties against those bringing continued frivolous claims before the quote-unquote courts. And I assume this goes back to something that I have been saying with who is going to be liable for all of these PDOs if there are any financial liabilities. And again, agents of the state technically should be protected from personal liability. However, one of the issues with state of emergencies are the usual checks and balances for the state to ensure that the state and its agents are acting responsibly are suspended. So now we're in a really tough spot. And I think this goes back to what you said. It's a widening gray area.
And that last part of the comment is true, because we have some international investors. We have
right. Yeah, for those that aren't reading it out, not only does this debacle erode the trust and confidence of the private civilians, moreover, it paints a vivid picture of gross incompetence to international investors and neutral onlookers.
So when you have public high individuals or business individuals in a country like this being alleged, have allegations leveled upon them, it goes far beyond just a PDO.
Well, not only that, consider the fact, because they tried to make an issue of the lease with Blue Waters and how the PNM was trying to put a 2015 valuation and rush it through. The problem is the Hadids have been trying to get this thing resolved. Now, we don't know if they did what they were supposed to do on their end or what the hiccup was. We just know that the lease has been up in the air since 2010 or before. So this seems like a long-term issue, right? And whatever the PNM did to make it look worse is actually not at the heart of the issue. And when investors see that, wait, so they had a court matter over a lease matter on state lands, and then it just conveniently got picked up 2 days after. They sent a pre-action protocol letter. This is why I say the timing is bad. And if I was the government, I would have asked the commissioner, please don't do it. Or if I was the Minister of Homeland Security and I had enough political experience to weigh the ramifications, because that's the other thing. Utilizing the SOE and the threats against the states, what does this say to investors on the stability of the country? Let's go to the next comment quick. Good day. If the objective of the PDO is to prevent and not solve crime, isn't the detention of those alleged to be in a conspiracy to commit murder a preventative action, and therefore they can legitimately be detained under the SOE? Yes, that's not the issue. The issue is this is not really helping you investigate the potential crime and then successfully prosecute said crime. All it's doing is hitting the pause button. And if it's a legitimate threat, then in theory, when the SOE ends, that threat is still on the table, right? Which is why, on some level, the minister's decision, oh, well, there's new evidence and, the benefits outweigh the risks, so we let them go. It's like, I thought the threat was real and the threat is on the table. And more importantly, as we were saying, all of the other conspiracy to commit murders and PDOs with regards to that, right? So when you release them, aren't they free to continue or to pick back up their conspiracy? And that's the issue. The PDOs kind of cause you to intercept them potentially prematurely. And by doing so, before you could build a case, you stop them from doing anything. Then since you can't charge them, eventually they're released. You're not actually solving crime. You're basically just putting a barrier to temporarily pause it. That's it. That's all your accomplishment. That's why we say the SOE is not a long-term solution to crime. That's why if the SOE ends tomorrow, there are legitimate concerns that the murder rate will skyrocket by a couple of months. And in fact, that was the justification in part for the current SOE. There were one weekend of several multiple casualty shootings within 12 hours. It was alarming. Unlike when you had the period of no SOE during the campaign and carnival, right? The election campaign and carnival, the murder rate didn't spike there. But we're talking within a month of the SOE ending earlier this year, we saw one horrific weekend where it was something like, 12 to 16 people just murdered in one day. That was alarming. And you could kind of understand why you would want an SOE to temporarily forestall that, but we didn't see any long-term measures to coincide with it. And that's the thing, we don't see any long-term action taken against these situations to coincide with how do we ensure that they are prevented permanently, not just temporarily.
So true.
All right, okay, so with that said, thanks to the commenters, no phone calls today, a lot to unpack with Ashraf on this situation. 1 minute, you have anything left to say? Or 30 seconds?
1 minute, I'll take 30 seconds. I just want to hear the final outcome of this matter.
There you go. Yeah, I think, and that's where we started. That is literally where we started. That is one of the issues. Said this with stuff on the PNM, now seeing it with stuff on the UNC. I want to see what the courts have to say about it to give us a final resolution. I suspect that we're not. I'll be honest with you. I suspect that we're not, but that's just me. I'll be pleasantly surprised if we get a resolution to this. That said, don't miss 10 questions coming out next with Andy Johnson at 10 a.m. 10 questions with Andy Johnson. Always interesting interviews. However, our time is over. So remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. And please, please, do not just have a blanket distrust for law enforcement. Right now, I understand that it's hard, but not every police officer is out to get you. I can guarantee you that, right? I guarantee you that. It's nice to be nice. Stay safe. Please don't speed on the roads, all right? Especially now during the rainy season. We want to be able to see each other on Monday. Bye-bye.
WESN.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios, but they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
In this day of stay at home and work from home, home has never meant more than it does today. Whether you're looking to buy, rent, or build your new home, now is the time to get going. Gittins & Gittins real estate agents are here to take you to that place of your dreams. Let us take you home. We'd help you find that rental to rest along the way, or journey with you to find your home destination. Investors and commercial enterprises too. Call us and we'll walk the distance to place your business in just the right location. Owners, leave the headaches to us. We'll find your tenants or buyers while you stay at home. We'll even manage your property at your bidding. Anything real estate, come home to Gittins & Gittins Real Estate. Call us at 760-3280 or 747-1220 or visit us at 16 Fifth Street in Woodbrook.